Views expressed and the opinions given by their guests do not necessarily reflect those of the Odyssey Files hosts, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
This is Michelle Belanger, author of The Dictionary of Demons. What is faster than a speeding shadow person and more fun than an anal probe? It's Mike and Dave of the Odyssey Files. Hold on to your hats and buns.
Views expressed. Good evening, paranormal community. Welcome to the Odyssey Files here on the Cosm Network and the Iron Range Radio Network. I am your host, Michael O'Neill. With me, as always, in front of his black screen with a black shirt, is my co-host, Mr. David Soyring. Good evening, Dave.
It's gray. It's dark gray. It's not black. But thank you. Good evening, Mike. How are we on this? That was an interesting intro. It's like it plays, and then it's like we're going live, and then it starts playing again. And I'm like, well, I don't know. Maybe I heard things. Maybe I'm hearing shit tonight. Maybe it's like one of those deja vu moments.
Well, you are old, so you know that can be seen now.
It's a sideways gesture. I mean, I don't know. So
what is? Oh, I'm sorry. If it goes up, it's offensive. But if it goes sideways, it's okay.
It didn't offend me doing it, so I don't know.
Yeah.
Hi, Paulo. I'm glad you can catch us. I'm glad that you're able to catch us. We're enjoy being here for you. We're glad to be here. Glad to be live. Glad to be
always live.
We're always live. Yeah, glad to be live on video is what I was going to say to you. Jumped in there, Mike. But always good to be here. Always good to be around on Monday nights and talk about all kinds of fun stuff. We got some good stuff tonight. Got a great guest tonight. Not
yes,
to like pump sunshine up our own butts, but
we only have the finest quality of guest, and
that's right.
That shines through tonight with Miss Elizabeth Saint, the CEO and creator of Cosm. And
our new boss, I guess.
Our new boss.
Yeah.
So it's going to be nothing but sunshine and rainbows. No gotcha questions here tonight, because otherwise it's been fun, but it'll be the last video show that you ever catch us on.
Yeah. I don't know how many times I can say, Elizabeth, you're great. I can't believe how great you are for like an hour. I don't know how that's going to go. So
we are going to find out.
Yeah. Yeah, looking forward to it.
So am I. In fact, let's just prelude any sentence that we have with Elizabeth, you're wonderful. Anyway, enough sucking up. Enough buttering up the boss. So we do have another set of stories and questions for you all, which we're hoping you will find interesting and informative, because that is what we're here for, along with 2 hours of nonstop entertainment value. But
right, there's always that. It's just now you get to see us and our facial expressions as we are when we're serious, and you'll be able to tell when we're serious and when we're joking and having fun, which we like to have fun. We like to keep things lighthearted. I mean, that's part of our show, has been for a long time, is that we try not to get too serious, like too, like this is the way it's going to be type of thing. That's not who we are. So,
well, technically with the stories that you chose tonight,
yeah,
I'm going to get a little riled up, and I think you did that on purpose.
I know you
did that on purpose.
I kind of did.
That's not cool.
There's three really good ones, and there's two. I started you off with the best one. So when we get to it, second one was chosen for a reason, and I have a very interesting take on the second one. So that's why I chose that one to read. So I'm gonna read that and then give it to it, and then I know you're gonna love the third one. Is all for you too. So.
Well, right. I mean, the novels that you chose are going to be great.
Those are not bad. I threw some away. So I'm just saying.
I just wanted to reiterate this, and that is the first two are going to be really, really good and really quick. And then it's going to be story hour. So once we get to that third story, I want everybody to pull up a blanket, get comfortable on the couch, maybe a bowl of popcorn, because apparently Uncle Mikey is going to be telling you a bedtime story.
I'll find longer ones for next week just to piss you off.
No, you won't.
I found some beauties.
I'll just be Dave. Where are the stories? I don't see any stories here.
Elizabeth has them.
That doesn't mean I'm going to be reading them. So if you want to read all of them, let me know and I'll take care of it.
No. I dig them up. You got to read your portion. So
no, what? No. All right, whatever. So we're going to start out. We're going to start out here, and I just want to also say before we begin, because I always forget towards the end, if anybody listening, whether listening or watching, would like to send us a question that they would like us to answer on air, or they have a story that they would like us to read and then respond to, please email us at odysseyfilesradio@gmail.com. And I think that I would love to do that more than Reddit stories.
So, me too. But, I'm taking what we got right at the moment.
Right. And especially...
as I say, we always say this, and we didn't say it this time, but we always do say it. If you have a personal experience or something you want to talk about that you don't want to go public, that is perfectly fine too. Reach out to us. We will not take it public. So if you tell us, hey guys, this really concerns me. I'd like your opinion on this. I'd be more than happy, and so would Mike, to give you an honest opinion of what we think is going on without discussing it in any way, shape, or form on the show, if that's what your personal wishes are. So just want to throw that out there, make sure that's clear, because I know some people don't want to talk about things because they don't want it brought out into the limelight, and we won't do that if you give us a heads up that you don't want that to happen. So
right. Good. That's a good point, because that's another thing that I always forget to do. It's a lot of stuff to remember, Dave. So,
that's why I'm here, man.
Exactly. So, all right, getting directly into these stories. Here's number one, and it's even labeled "Demon Story Number One." So
it is.
I'm not sure what number two would be, but okay. So here we go. Since I was little, I've noticed strange things at night in my house. Steps, strange beings observing me from different points of my room and home, and intelligible words. Once I got enough understanding about invocations, I decided to ask a demon for protection. Not a typo. Demon for protection.
No, it's not.
I chose this because I've never had faith in God. Protect me, and in exchange, you can keep a part of me. This was the pact that we created. Since then, all these beings stayed away. They hide in other rooms when I walk to the kitchen at night or to the bathroom. In return, since that day, I suffer from asthma. No one in my family has or has ever had asthma, and I'm not allergic to anything that can cause asthmatic attacks. And many times around me, I see a huge figure just there looking at me. The activity, the most recent happened was last night. I went to the bathroom to brush my teeth, and after noticing something behind my back, even though I was against the door, my nose began to bleed very heavily. So that is a really weird way to end that story. Like, there's
That's what it was. Yep.
No reaction. No, like, that was bad. So let me take a breath. Okay. So the whole demon for protection thing. What? That's insane. So I chose this since I've never had faith in God, but yet you have faith in demon. I don't understand how you make that like mental switch, because obviously if you believe in God, then, or at least you believe in demons, you believe in God as well. You can't believe in one and not have the other. And so I guess my question for this person is, why would you think a demon would be better than God? That blows my mind right there. And I'm not a big proponent of God. I'm definitely not a proponent of demons, but that just doesn't make any sense to me, that if you're going to put your faith in something, why not have it be good? And the light and the love, because that's always going to win. I mean, all you're going to do now is go your entire life with asthma, and I'm sure at some point in time, it's probably going to kill you. And then, hey, you get to burn in hell the rest of eternity. So go you. You really made a good deal just to keep a bunch of faces or whatever from looking at you. Like, it doesn't even say like they were attacking. They're just like,
no, it's just made them uncomfortable.
Made them uncomfortable. A lot of things make me uncomfortable. Broccoli makes me uncomfortable, but I don't ask demonic protection to save me from vegetables. So I don't know what he's I don't know what he's exactly trying to accomplish here. Because I will say this: when I first was reading it, and I didn't get to that whole protection thing yet.
Yeah.
I honestly was under the impression that this was going to be like an alien story, like he was being observed by, the Greys or something like that.
Right.
Did not see the demonic protection coming. But I will say this: if you want to make a pact and you don't care about your soul and you just want it to burn in hell for eternity, have at it. Demons galore. They'll be more than happy to keep, entities away from you for the rest of your life until they somehow manage to make you die. So that's my take on it.
Okay. So I like this story because, first of all, I know I have some friends of mine that are agnostic, and I am not. So I am a strong believer in God. I'm 100%. You couldn't convince me otherwise. I don't care what the hell you came up with. There's nothing you could do, say, or show me that would make me believe that God doesn't exist. So that said, I have some friends that are agnostic, and I just want to point this out, that if you don't have faith in God yet, for whatever your personal reasons are at this stage of your life, or whatever stage you're in, or maybe you had faith and you lost it due to something. But there are other things that are positive that you can put your faith in. It's not like it's just a 50-50 slice here. It's not like, okay, well, I used to believe in God and then my mom died, and now, why would God take her away? And now I hate God. And so therefore now I'm going to make a deal with a demon. I don't get that mentality. I would think that with these negative things happening to you, it should be an eye opener. I'm going to kind of blame TV right now in the fact that they are talking about everything being so demonic, and that I can see, and this is one of the points I wanted to bring up on this story, even though it was short, I can see where somebody might watch the shows on television that deal with a lot of negativity and kind of see value in it and not be afraid of it. And I can see that. Not that I would feel that way, but I can see that some people out there might feel that way. Good, bad, or indifferent. To me, it's bad, but I mean, obviously, to everybody else, they have their own values and their own opinions. So I just want to point that out. There are other things that you can put your faith in, not in demons. Secondly, you made a huge mistake here, and this is coming from me personally. You made a huge, huge mistake, and if you don't correct that mistake, it's going to be your end of days story, and it's not going to go good for you in any way, shape, or form. And whatever the demon promised you is a lie, and it's not going to come true, and you're not going to get anything except for eternal damnation when you die. So you have time to rescind. Yeah, according to our good friend, should I say his name? Yeah, I suppose, right? Reverend
Sure.
Schrader. So Reverend Schrader said, and pointed this out very emphatically at Para Unity, that you always have time to redeem your soul, no matter what your mistakes were, as long as you redeem them before you pass from this world. So I thoroughly believe that too. And so for this person, or for anybody who might have made a mistake like this in their lives, and I had friends growing up, teenagers who made mistakes like this. I had teenage buddies of mine who made pacts, conjured stuff up and made pacts because they wanted out of where we lived, and they wanted a better life, and they wanted it all instantaneously without working for it. And so they went to the dark side, and they actually, from what I could tell, they actually, were successful in making their agreement because they all died young. And so, their souls got claimed pretty quickly. So I'll leave it at that. I don't want to sound like I'm preaching, but I chose this story because there are other alternatives. Don't go to the dark side would be my personal opinion. And, we'll leave it at that. You got anything else, Mike?
I do. I agree with everything that you said, except the part about the TV shows. I agree that everything, well, I shouldn't say everything, almost everything out there has some sort of negative, evil,
right,
demonic type connotation to it. But every single episode is about people being tortured and, really messed with and hurt and attacked. I don't see how that would make anybody go, you know what? I want protection from that, from those people or, whatever, those entities. I mean, you just kind of said that seeing those shows would leave somebody to believe that they could rely on things like that. I don't see that at all, because those shows are made to not only put evil in the mainstream, into the limelight, but then in some way like smacks it down with good. So I would think that would lead more people to believe in good than evil. Just that evil is more prevalent out there.
Right. So I'll tell you why I said that is because, and this is exactly how, this is a societal attitude, is that people are going to look at the situation like that and they're going to say, yeah, it happened to them, but it ain't going to happen to me. And that's exactly what people's mentality is. I watched as a teenager, kids riding their BMX bikes off of a garage roof into a swimming pool down the block from where I grew up. And there was this kid took this horrific head first into the deck, missed the pool, hospital bound, teeth missing, blood all over the place type of accident, right? The next guy threw his bike off the garage roof and jumped down. The guy after him said, yeah, it happened to him because he's an asshole. It ain't going to happen to me. And he went right through the side of the pool. So that is the mentality out there. That mentality exists. And I think by putting the dark into the limelight, you are bringing into this whole type of thing. Hey, we've got this darkness. Maybe it's something new for people. People that aren't really religious aren't really exposed to demons and evil and Lucifer, because that conversation doesn't come up if you don't grow up in a religious household. It doesn't come up. When you get older, maybe you're talking to your friends about it. Maybe you watch something, you read a book, whatever. You learn about it. It gets incorporated into your life. It gets introduced to you, but you don't know about it. And now you've got mainstream TV throwing out everything dark. Almost like, to me, it's almost to the point where they're portraying it as, hey, check this out, man. This is happening all over the place. I can see how some people would look at that and say, well, you know what? Maybe there's something there to gain because, yeah, it happened to that lady, it happened to that guy, but I'm smarter than them, or I'm better than them, or I'm faster than them, or I can lie better, or I can manipulate things better. And so it isn't going to happen to me. So I can go and make that deal. I can take care of business and I'm going to get what I want. And when time comes for me to pay my bill, I'm just going to slip out because that's how cool I am. And if you don't think that there's people in society that have that attitude, then, my friend, you need to get the hell out of the house more often, because there's a whole huge population of people who think like that.
I concede that there are definitely people that have that superiority complex. They have that ego. They have that arrogance. Absolutely 100%. I do not think, though, that it is the majority of the population. I think the
I didn't
majority
say
of the
majority.
population.
I said a segment of the population. I never said majority.
Right. Well, I'm just saying
Right.
that it's
Okay.
such a small amount of people
Right.
that I. But I will concede that they have. I think most people nowadays who watch these shows, they don't necessarily have the I'm that's never going to happen to me, as opposed to I'm so glad that isn't happening to me. I mean, you you have that arrogance on one side, and then the other side you have the people asking if they watch these shows, are they going to get haunted?
Right.
You know, so
Right.
there are two sides to the spectrum, and in the middle is fact and intelligence,
Well, common sense.
common sense, I
As
suppose.
I would say, common sense is a big part of it, because common sense is the things that teach you not to play with Ouija boards after you hear a whole bunch of horrific stories about bad things that happen to people because of Ouija boards. That's just common sense. You make an intelligent decision based on the fact that you don't want to be the one who's got these dark entities showing up in your house. And that leads us a perfect segue into our next story.
Segway!
Segue. Even DIY Ouija boards work. This story took place in my childhood home in Minnesota. I live in Oklahoma now. My sister and I were home alone and bored, so we decided to play some creepy games, like the playing card game, which is probably the least deadly game to play in my opinion, which that's always good to hear. Once that didn't pan out with any interesting results, my sister and I decided that we wanted to play the Ouija board instead. The only problem with that is being that we didn't have one, so we had to make one ourselves. It wasn't anything extravagant, just a piece of paper and a picture reference later. We had our board. My sister, we'll call her Kay, shut the curtains and blinds in the living room and kitchen, since that's where we were playing, while I collected a few candles to light. Once we were settled, I decided that I wanted to record our game with my phone and asked her to wait. Though fair warning, I do have an Android, so the footage was dark and grainy. Way to bash on Androids. I have an Android and my footage isn't dark and grainy. So anyway, I was lamenting my foes when it happened. My woes, sorry, when it happened. As I fiddled with my cell to try and get it to brighten, I turned it towards the window, staring at my surroundings through the screen. Then I shifted onto love seat in order to direct the camera down the hall leading to the front door. Now, on the corner right next to the living room was the door to the laundry room. This door was shut, and that is important information because with the way this thing appeared, wouldn't have been possible for a human to do. When I panned the camera over, it only took a few seconds before a humanoid head popped out from the wall. Long dark hair, shifting with the movement. I immediately stopped the film and tossed my phone onto the cushion next to me as I began to open curtains, not daring to move over to the light switch, which was right where that thing had appeared. Kay asked what was wrong, and not wanting to scare her, I waited until we were out of the house before telling her, then letting her watch the video. The scariest part of the interaction was that, outside of the screen on my cell phone, there was nothing there. I'm just thankful that we never actually started playing the game. I can't imagine I would have liked anything it had to say. Okay. So, obviously, if you're a fan of the show, you know my feeling on Ouija boards. Stay the hell away from them. Plain and simple. The interesting thing about this story, and the reason I chose it, is because she witnessed something in the house. And then I was like, okay, well, of course you did, because you're starting, you're playing with the Ouija board. And then that one line caught me. I'm just thankful that we never actually started playing the game. And that's what kind of stuck out to me on this story. So my question is, because this really got me thinking. So my question is having the intent to use a Ouija board just as bad as using a Ouija board?
You'd have to have some sort of experimentation, which I'm not going to be a part of.
No, I don't think I am either. But I mean, it's an interesting question, right? Because they didn't, like, there's nothing happening in the house. They made a Ouija board, a generic one out of paper, but they didn't use it, and she already was witnessing something. So is it possible that just the thought process, just that thought pattern of we're going to experiment, we're going to play with this Ouija board, is that enough to get something interested in what you're doing and show up to kind of watch you from the shadows, to kind of watch you from the background? Because I kind of took, I don't know that it is, to be honest. I don't know that I can get behind that. But it's an interesting question. So,
well, one of the things to keep in mind here, it's a little different than somebody like opening up the box. I mean, they literally had to take out a piece of paper and then draw their own Ouija board.
Right.
So, I mean, that's
not using it, though.
But it goes along with intent. I mean, if you sit there for the entire time, I'm making this Ouija board to use it. Maybe you have the questions going through your head of what you want to ask. Is that, I mean, even though you don't have the pamphlet, but it's not making the Ouija board while maybe those questions are going through your mind, or in your intent to do it, is that not in a sense using it in a minuscule amount?
I would agree with you in kind of a very small way. Yes, I would agree with you that there is some intent happening there, because I would assume with you that if you're creating a Ouija board, you already have questions in your mind that you're anticipating to ask when the board is completed. You're not building it, completing it, and then setting it down and then sitting there with your arms folded for a half hour going, well, I don't know what we should ask. What do you think we should ask? That's not happening. Right. I mean, they know kind of what they want to ask. So in a way, I guess in a way that is starting the intent process.
Well, then here's a question to go right along with this one. And that is, when does the door open?
Right.
Does the door open when you are sitting down and you have your hands on it and you start asking questions? You're like, I'm talking to the demon of the board. Or does it start, especially in this case, when you are actually making the board?
Right.
When does the door open?
Right. That was kind of my question. I mean, that's why I thought this was a good story. Because it appears that activity is starting prior to using the board. So if that's the case, something is happening. Something that I'm not accustomed to. Because to me, I have always been, intent is not given unless you put your fingers on the planchette. Because you're physically touching it at that point and you are giving intent into the board, trying to communicate with something. Now, I know a lot of people argue that using an SB7 is the same as a Ouija board. You're never going to convince me of that. I think that's total bullshit. All I'm doing using an SB7 is turning on a radio. That's all. It's no different than turning on a REM pod, no different than turning on a K2. There's intent there too. I turn on a K2 and I'm asking for something to interact with it, or something to touch the antenna on the REM pod, or something to go up and talk into my recorder, or something to speak through the SB7. There's intent in every single one of those instances. So I don't know where the hell people ever got behind the concept of an SB7 is just a radio Ouija board. I'm like, whatever. I don't get it. But using a Ouija board, obviously there's a big difference, because you're physically touching it. You're physically giving it permission to enter into your space. I've never given permission for anything in the SB7 to enter into my personal space. So
going back really quick on the whole, like, when does the door open thing?
Yeah.
Because this just came up. Now, do you think that maybe making a board is actually far worse than just taking out Milton Bradley copy of it? Because when you just open up the box and you put it down, there's no personalness to it. Like, it doesn't have a piece of you. None of your energy is into it.
No, it'd be like opening a game of Monopoly and putting a Monopoly board down or a life board down. It's the same, right? It's a board game. Exactly. It's the same thing, right?
But in this instance, when you're making a board and you have the intent the entire time, is that board not right from the beginning then charged with your energy and intent? Is it not even more of a door because you created it by, you were the one that created it.
Right.
Would that not be 10 times worse?
I think you might be onto something.
I just made the 10 times thing up. So
I understand that. I blew that off, but I like where you're going with that, because I think that you might be onto something, right? I mean, because there has to be some sort of difference between opening the box and just taking out the board and setting it down and then never touching it. Is anything ever going to happen? No. Why would it? You haven't charged the board up. You're not giving it permission to do anything. You haven't asked it any questions. You've given none of your personal energy to it. So is there anything ever going to happen with that Ouija board? No. But if you're making your own, you're drawing it up. Are you at that point already opening up the door? And maybe that's why she had that experience without even, using the board. But that was the whole point of why I grabbed that story, is because when I read it and I'm like, I'm not going to, we talk about Ouija boards all the time. And I don't want to be repetitious in talking about them when we do our hour on like listener mail and Reddits and stuff like that. But, that when she said, I'm glad we didn't do anything with the board, I'm thinking, well, wait a second here. How are you having experiences when you haven't done anything with it? So I think that's a great question. I think your answer is fantastic. My advice to her and to any other young adult who's listening to this, there are reasons why, like some of these games, some of these dares, some of these things, like one man hide and seek, deadly card game, they're not a joke. Mike had a case where they were playing one man hide and seek. That was ritualistic as hell. When you were describing it to me, I'm like, dude, time out. That's like totally ritualistic. That's totally conjuring something up. You're putting pieces of your own hair and toenails and stuff in the damn doll that you're sewing up, and you have to sew it with a specific colored thread, and you got to do this and you got to do that. I'm like, that is total like witchcraft, demonology, satanic, whatever you want to call it. That is dark magic. And that's part of the game of one man hide and seek, is that you have to create this totem, this doll that supposedly comes to life. So
it's actually dead man's hide and seek.
Is it? Sorry.
And that is actually the case that we do not talk about, because that is the only case in my entire career, and I'm being 100% honest in this, where my investigator Scott and I went in there completely worried and scared for our clients and really wanted to get in there and help them. And we left after one investigation feeling sorry for the spirits. Those clients, and I this is not my most professional moment in my career, literally called them morons during the investigation while they were there. They were right next to me during a spirit box session when they finally told me, oh yeah, are you angry with us because we kept playing, these games? Excuse me? What? Huh? Like that was information you did not
love. Right. I love that when you're on an investigation and like, as you get into the conversation, all of a sudden it's like, well, yeah, there was that one time when my girlfriend and I, when we were like 8 and we were playing with a Ouija board at that old abandoned house, and then all hell broke loose and the wind blew through the room and then she just disappeared and we never saw her again. But that was whatever. That was nothing.
That was so 2019.
Yeah, that was so like 30 years ago. I mean, why the hell would it wait 30 years to come do something? Oh, okay.
I'm not going to get into that case because
no, right. I don't want you to get into that case. We got stories to get through.
Right, but I just really, really quick, because this is what got to me. Not so much the whole we didn't play the game, or we didn't play with the Ouija board. But come on here, people. Probably the least deadly game to play, in my opinion.
Right.
Well, whoop-de-doo!
Yeah, that struck me as odd, too.
We didn't pan out with any interesting result. What results were you hoping for? It's the least deadly game.
Right.
What results were you looking for?
Like my sister to be killed in some horrible fashion while we're sitting here playing some stupid dare card game or something? I don't know. I don't know what the hell results they're looking for.
Yeah, and then you finish it with, I don't think I would have liked what he had to say.
Right.
What?
Right.
I need some sort of like sound that's like, like the Homer Simpson, one where he's choking part.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
choking
like
part.
I need that, because that's what I would give these people. I'm just going to finish it with this before I get into Story Tower. And that is, stop doing shit that you do not know what you are doing. You're not going to like the results. Just stop it.
I agree.
I understand. I fully understand how provocative, how interesting, how just fascinating this field is. Dave, you've been in it 50 years. I've been in it 10.
Right.
I am still just as interested and fascinated by this field as ever.
I am too.
But
that's why I'm still doing it.
Be smart, because your career is going to end, and maybe even your life, or
somebody you love. You got to remember, dark entities don't necessarily go after the person who conjured them up. They will eventually, but they like to create pain and misery. And the easiest way to create pain and misery is to start destroying the lives of people you love, like your family, your boyfriend, your grandparents, whatever. Those people are the ones who suffer. In a lot of instances, when this stuff really comes to fruition, those are the people who suffer, not the person who conjured it, not the person who did the ritual. It's everybody else that's associated with them. Regretfully, they get lumped into it. I don't think that's fair. Just like I don't think curses are fair. If my great-great-grandfather 10 times removed killed some lady who was a witch back in 1242 and my family's been cursed, F that. How is my life getting destroyed 800 years down the road because of something that one of my, far removed relatives did? That's crap. So,
yeah.
All right. So get into you ready? You took your drink of water now, so you can get into your story.
I'm parched. I'm going to be out of breath and parched after this story.
You need a throat lozenge when you're done.
Pretty much. So this is titled "Taunted a Ghost and Paid for It." All right. So she even starts it out with, "This is a really long but 100% true story," and she is not exaggerating. So, like I said, make sure you're comfortable. Get your blanket ready, your pillow perched up. Go grab your coffee and a bit, box of popcorn or whatever, because this is going to be a bit.
This is a great story, though. So.
It is interesting. All right. So 25 years ago, I moved in with my cousin and her roommate / coworker, Jose. The house was an old cement block, 3-room, 1-bath house with a large fenced yard. He had 2 very large German shepherds that lived there and were mostly in the yard. This house is in Claremelle, Florida, in a shitty, packed suburban neighborhood. Nothing special. Rent was cheap. $50 a week from what I remember, and the house was clean. Plus, my cousin lived there too. So I moved in. We all got along well. Everyone worked. We pretty much kept to ourselves and saw each other for a few minutes here and there. I lived there for about 6 months. This is the story of what caused me to move out. It's a lot of context. So there you go. On a weekend night, we all happened to be off from work. We decided to invite some friends over from the pool hall that we frequented, and Jose invited some people over that they worked with at the pharmaceutical lab. There were probably 20 people there total. We played music and did what young people do. Eventually, it got pretty late, and we found ourselves talking about ghosts. We all shared stories. My cousin and I come from a pretty spooky family, so we had some good ones, and everybody was really into the discussion. Jose was quiet throughout most of the conversation. He waited until we all kind of quieted down, and then he said, "This house is haunted." My cousin and I shot each other a look, and then both laughed because, yeah, sometimes Jose's 20-pound cat would meow at the empty hall, but that was it. That's a pretty fat cat, just saying.
That's a big cat.
He proceeded to tell us that there was a presence in the house and that it mostly stayed in the shed in the backyard. The tiny little pink wooden shed that I had never even looked at. Cheryl She Shed.
Exactly.
He he told us that he always keeps the curtains in his bedroom closed because his window faces the shed and the door to the shed will not stay shut. He has jammed it shut a million times and it always pops back open. It creeps him out. He said he could tell when it was in the house because he would wake up feeling depressed. It creeped me out. I didn't want to think that I lived with a presence, and I didn't like the idea that it was hurting my roommate. I was a tough chick, in my opinion, and I was like, F that ghost. I'll shut that door and you won't have to keep your curtains closed anymore. I said all this because in my heart, I didn't really believe that anything was in the shed or the house. I believed that we were effing around. So I told him, I told them all that I was going to go outside and inspect the shed and deal with the door. Everyone followed me, and while we were all walking around the outside of the house, Jesus told me Jose told me that it was a bad idea to mess around with the shed, that whatever it was wanted the door open, and I should just leave it alone. We all got out there, and it was exactly what I thought it was going to be. A very worn down wooden shed that oddly kind of looked like a tiny house more than a shed. I looked inside and there was a busted up lawnmower and sold old paint buckets. Maybe it means soiled.
Some old paint buckets, I think. Like
some
old like lawnmower. Yeah, I know. You don't have to read it verbatim.
Right. That's what we're supposed to do, Dave. Anyways, and some old paint bucket, some rusty screens and darkness. I looked around outside and found some rusty ass shovels in the corner of the garage area. I took a shovel over to the shed. I kicked the door of the shed back into the frame. The door was closed and literally kicked into the frame, kicked shut. I took the handle of the shovel and put it under the handle of the shed door. I shoved that into the ground. It was secure. We all went back inside. We bullshitted some more, but it was late. I'm going to say 1 a.m. by the time we all got back in, and everyone kind of said their goodbyes. We let the dogs out of their pen in the yard and locked the gate. We made sure the front gate was secure so they wouldn't get out, and then we straightened up the house a little bit, and eventually all went to bed. Sometime around 6 a.m., I woke up because I needed to pee. I opened the bedroom door, and I was sleepy still, but there was a weird sound as I opened the door. It startled me, like fingernails scraping at something coarse. I opened the door all the way, and the shovel fell in the door and hit me. I can't even put into words how I felt in that moment. The shovel had been standing against the bedroom door. There was a tiny pile of dirt where the tip had been sat against the tile floor at the hallway. I rushed through the house to the side door, which was locked, and then out to the backyard. The shed door was wide open. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I ran back in the house. I immediately pounded on the both Jose and my cousin's bedroom doors. I was terrified and angry. I absolutely knew that one of them had done this. I knew that your dear reader couldn't be there to see the reaction, but I promise you neither of them did it. Jose literally started to weep. He begged me to tell him I was lying. He begged my cousin to admit that she had done it. When neither of us would take responsibility, he went to the store and got a bunch of religious candles, produced a rosary, and started trying to pray whatever it was away. Or pray for me for being so stupid. My Spanish wasn't even close to fluent enough to keep up with his prayers. My cousin, on the other hand, was pissed. She was ready to fight me. She was adamant that I was pulling a prank. She cussed me up and down. She called me a liar and said that I was a child. That most of all, she didn't appreciate being woken up at 6 a.m. after a night of partying to be the pawn of my prank. When I knew that neither of them had put the shovel against the door or reopened the shed door, I was literally terrified. There was no way someone else got in the yard, passed the dogs, got the shed door open, and then got into the locked house to put the shovel against my door. I didn't sleep there again without someone else in the room with me. Every moment spent there after that was beyond tense. We all kind of stopped talking to each other, and Jose and my cousin ended up in a terrible argument over a button on the stereo, and she moved out within a week. It took me 2 weeks to find another place to live. I never went back. So, all right, kiddies. Now it's time for, I guess, reaction. Now that everybody has been put to sleep by my wonderful voice.
It's a great story.
It is a great story, but don't
what's great
taunt
about
spirits.
that story? Right. I was just saying the best thing about that story is that you could see that story in your mind as you were reading it. Like when I first read it, I could see in my mind all of these actions playing out. Like having some friends over, acting tough. Oh, I'll take care of that stupid shit. Walking out there. I could just see it all. Everybody follows in a group behind you like, oh, we're going to go watch her take care of the shed. Just a great story. And I think it happened.
I think it happened. I mean, stuff like that happens all the time. On reenacted shows and stuff like that. You see this aported type stuff all the time.
Yep.
And honestly, I understand why she freaked out. Like that's crazy. That's crazy business.
It's pretty crazy.
But I mean, it's one of those things. Again, don't bite off more than you can chew. I know she wanted to be tough. I know she thought that there's nothing in there. But I mean, if there's nothing in there, then why do it? Like why was it such a big deal that she had to be the one to fix the shed door? I mean,
I could tell you why. I tell you about a 90% chance it was alcohol fueled. Because
liquid courage,
people start drinking. They don't think straight. They're thinking straight. They just think they could do more than they're capable of doing, and they don't realize what their limitations are anymore. Like Jeff Foxworthy made a career out of stories that started with, here, hold my beer and watch this shit. Right. So, and I think that's what happened here. And that's exactly why, and I'll just throw this in there and then you can get back into your review of it, is that's one of the reasons why we don't allow like any type of drinking or drug use or anything when we're on an investigation. Because it changes your sense of what you are and are not capable of doing when you alter your mind like that. So we never use any type of, like, nobody's allowed to go out and have a few beers and then go investigate, and especially at a client's house. So
exactly. The thing about it is
Amy.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't have the words. It's just you're always, all of these stories that you see, the reenactments, well, I should say like 98% of them deal with people who bite off more than they can chew. That, and the thing about it is let's just say that she came to us. Like she did not write this for Reddit. She came to us.
Right.
Like I wouldn't even have taken that whole thing as like negative or evil, or that, she was about to be injured in any way. I would have been like, he's trying to tell you to leave the effing door open.
Right.
Leave the door open and you'll be fine.
Right.
And this is another one of those things where the lack of knowledge in the paranormal is what fuels all of this fear and like in the unknown, and that everybody thinks that every little bit is going to attack them or is there to steal their soul, or some sort of an evil presence. A presence is not evil,
not inherently. No.
Right. So, I mean, and I guess I just don't see, I don't like the fact that Jose was like, I know the presence is in the house because I wake up depressed. A lot of people wake up depressed. That's why people drink coffee. That doesn't mean
you wake up tired. You don't wake up depressed to drink coffee. Where the hell did you ever hear that from? Coffee is not a cure for depression, Mike.
To some people it is.
No, depression is a mental illness that requires medical care and stuff like that. That has nothing to do with coffee. I think he was saying it was a change of, like, he felt different. And so he sensed that there was like a change in the house, in the energy in the house. Well, is how I read that.
Right. But I think that a lot of people exchange the word depressed for sad, because you can wake up sad,
Sure.
And then, but you're not literally depressed. So I think he said depressed, but I think he just really meant I wake up sad.
I would say that
And
I think he woke up and felt the energy shift in the house because he knew when it was around.
he said the only reason he knows that it's around is because he wakes up sad, well, depressed. But
Depressed. Yeah.
so I'm just saying,
Well,
maybe a
Jose,
cup of
brew up some
coffee.
coffee, buddy. There you go.
Exactly. You know, a lot of people wake up and they're angry and they're mad, and then they drink coffee and they're just fine. Just saying. Not me. I don't drink coffee, but I see the memes, whatever.
Yeah.
I'm just throwing that out there.
Got to admit, though, if you woke up and there was a shovel that you just wedged underneath the door of the shed outside and it was leaned up against your door to your bedroom, that's a hell of a statement by the entity. That is like the most clear and concise statement by the entity that's like, you know what? I like the shed door open. You don't get it. It's not sinking in, and it's going to stay open, and you're not going to keep it closed. I thought that'd be phenomenal to wake up to that.
I think that if that ever happened to me with my current knowledge,
Yeah.
I think I would probably just look at it and be like, I don't say this often, but that's a little creepy. And then, go on with life. But that's just me. That's not her, obviously.
No. I would have just apologized. Yeah, I would have just apologized. I'd be like, sorry about the shed door. My mistake, blah, blah, blah. And moved on. Okay.
Yeah.
My friends and I lost several hours walking home. I recently met up with some old friends, and this story from 20 years ago came up. It's something I've never forgotten, and we have never been able to explain. Before I begin, I want to make it perfectly clear that none of us were drunk. There is no alcohol involved in the story whatsoever. A bit of setup. I live in a small town in England. The road that I lived at the time on runs parallel to the high street with several pubs and one nightclub. Another road runs vertically to connect the two. Think of a capital I with the lines on the top and bottom. The local nightclub is at the bottom of the I, and my flat is at the top. It's a straight road, 10-minute walk from one end to the other. This is important. On to the story. Myself and 4 friends found ourselves in the local nightclub at about 11 p.m., stone cold sober, as we were queuing at the bar to get our first drinks of the night. Just before we got served, there was a power cut. Emergency lights came on. Everybody escorted out of the club. The whole town was out. It was the middle of winter, so we decided to cut our losses and walk back to my flat and finally have a drink. It was no later than 11:45 at this point, probably a little bit earlier. We started the walk back to mine. It was incredibly dark and eerie, so we did what I think anyone would do in that situation. We tried to scare the crap out of each other. The walk was otherwise uneventful. We got back to my flat, and after fumbling around in the dark looking for a light source, we settled in, and I started making us some long-awaited drinks. That's when one of my friends asked what the time was. Thinking this was another spooky story, I waited for the rest of it. I remember her voice chilling me when she said, "No, seriously, what's the time?" We all looked at our watches. All were showing 3:20 a.m., except for one that had stopped at 1:05 a.m. I don't know if that's important, because sometimes watches just stop. None of us remember anything unusual aside from the power cut, but somehow we lost 3.5 hours on a 10-minute walk. While talking about this, my friends and I did create an approximate timeline of the entire evening to see if there were any gaps we could fill. Some of us remember things that others don't, but it was 20 years ago, so I figured that's normal. We mostly recall it the same, and none of us have any idea where the other 3.5 hours went. The whole night was weird, but explainable up to that point. The timeline does explain why we were sober. I haven't included it due to length, that I don't want to believe any of this is relevant to the actual event, but will update to anyone if interested. I'm going right off the bat here, off the deep end, and I'm going with abduction. I am saying that there was no coincidence that power outage happened. That was a way to get people out in open space and vulnerable. And that for whatever reason, whatever life form was there, when the bars emptied out, this group was kind of goofing around and trying to scare each other and kind of had that energy and that vibe going, and maybe somebody was a little creeped out and somebody was laughing, thinking, oh, I got them really good. And they experienced something that's not abnormal in the paranormal, which is time loss. And biggest answer for time loss is abduction. Because I don't see any other type of like haunting or evil or any darkness or anything like that here. Although we have been told. I have not experienced this, and I have not had a client who's experienced this, to my knowledge. At least they didn't tell me. But that in some really dark cases where there is an evil infestation, that time loss is one of the kind of like indicators that there's an infestation in the house and that it's working its way to oppression. Is that people lose track of time and don't understand where like the day went, or like, how am I still sitting here? I was just doing this 10 minutes ago and now it's 2 hours later. So, but in this situation, I definitely think it was abduction. So I definitely think that I think so. And I really think that way because if you listen to what he said about, we kind of remember it the same way, but it's been 20 years. That right there to me screams, we kind of have these similar memories because they were implanted, but we're not all on the same page, but we're close enough that we're just going to use the fact that it was 20 years as an excuse. Because I can tell you right now that if I got together with some friends of mine that experienced some really incredible things, like things that were life-changing, and we sat down and talked about it, it's been 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, we're all going to be spot on. Like, we are going to be able to recount what it was at that moment that we all experienced that was absolutely like earth-shattering at that moment in our lives. I don't think it's going to be one of those, we kind of think we're kind of on the same page. So I don't know. I'm going UFO. What do you think?
I too am going UFO. I do not know if I subscribe to the aliens caused the blackout to get people out into the streets. That's just
reaching.
I think you're reaching on that one. Now, does that not mean? That does not mean that they in some way were not responsible for the blackout. I just don't think it had any sort of actual purpose other than they were around and a blackout was caused by, I don't know, an
draw of energy.
An EMP. Yeah, an EMP or something like that.
Right.
But yeah, I don't necessarily think that it had a malicious purpose to get people out in the streets. However, I do think that, and I agree with you that lost time is really, really prevalent in ufology and stuff like that. I thought the way I read it when it came to the memories is that it wasn't so much that like they were trying to come up with the same consensus.
Consistent.
You know what I'm looking? No, like agreement on what happened. I'll just change the word. But
total agreement. Yeah.
Well, exactly. I kind of got it that some people remembered more than what others did, and that's what they were taking as the 20-year difference. Which I think if you're going to take a bunch of people all at once, that's going to happen. Because people, let's just look at Travis Walton. Anybody that was taken during that doesn't remember anything except him, and he woke up, and he remembers all of this entire story, whereas other people remember nothing. I think, again, it has to do with our physical DNA or whatever. Some things work better with people than others do. So, I'm not surprised that certain people remembered more because maybe whatever they were using to, make it so they would forget didn't work very well on them. Right. The one thing that I do want to touch base, and this came to mind when you started talking about it as well. The only other thing that would happen is some mass possession. You were saying how it was like infestation to oppression. I could have sworn that was a possession thing, not that when you're possessed, they take over and that's where you lose the time.
Was it that far deep into the?
I thought
possession. So. Could have been.
So, I honestly cannot see these four people who have no history of any sort of negative entities around or whatever, that all of a sudden that's supernatural stuff right there.
Right.
Like
yeah,
that.
No.
that's the black smoke coming in and like, that. No, I can't see that happening.
No, I can't either.
But apparently I can see UFOs happening. So go figure on that one.
Well, it's because UFOs are out there.
They're all out there.
Everything's out there.
Anyway. But yeah, so I'm going to agree. You got abducted. I guess we say that so nonchalant. Sorry, you got abducted.
Yeah, you got abducted, but you're okay. Just look and see if you got a blue rice kernel in your arm.
Exactly.
And if you don't know what that means, shame on you. You should be listening to our show more often because that's a hell of a story.
It is a hell of a story. So, all right. Well, that does it for stories. We are going to go to commercial break. And when we come back, the great and amazing boss of us, Elizabeth Saint, is going to be joining us. So we'll see you on the other side.
Hi, Tom Bodette. If you can hear me, then you have an internet connection, which means you can do cool things online, like listen to streaming radio, obviously, or watch a video of a monkey washing a cat. Let your freak flag fly. Or you can book a room at a great price at Motel6.com. Isn't the internet wonderful? Everything you want right at your fingertips and, whoa, did not need to see that. I'm Tom Bodette for Motel 6, and we'll leave the light on for you.
Unexpected reactions to smart financial decisions brought to you by feedthepig.org.
Well, I finally did it. My student loan is totally paid off.
I can't believe it.
I can't believe it either. I paid more than the minimum each month, and soon enough, it was gone.
So you're just giving up?
Giving up on what?
The life of luxury. Egyptian cotton, caviar Thursdays, designer everything.
What are you talking about?
Our plan. What happened to winning the lottery and mastering the art of the perfect mimosa? Hosting galas, wearing enough jewelry to require a bodyguard, vacationing in the French Riviera, and then buying it.
I just thought maybe it was time to prepare for my future. You know, set some financial goals, make some smart investments, open a 401k.
Financial goals? Investments? A 401k? You are horrifying right now. Listen, if winning the lottery were easy, everyone would do it.
When it comes to financial stability, don't get left behind. Get tools and tips for saving at feedthepig.org. This message brought to you by the American Institute of CPAs and the Ad Council.
Northern Tool and Equipment.
So me and the boys head out to tailgate today and find some other fans in our spot.
Well, it happens.
Cheering for the wrong team.
Oh, this is war.
Even worse, they've got this couch set up and everything.
A couch?
Yeah, it's sectional.
All right, first thing, don't ever use the word sectional again.
Done.
Second, I want you to grab a 4,700-pound tow chain with J-hook and grab hammer. Throw that on the back of your truck.
Got it.
Now you're going to Hail Mary the J-hook over the end of that couch. Time to find a better spot for your new friends.
That should do it.
There's no problem a little horsepower can't solve. Northern Tool and Equipment.
Taking a family of 5 to the amusement park can cost a small fortune.
Oh, yeah. So to save some money, we thought, hey, let's bring the amusement park to us. Yeah. Go ahead.
All right. Step right up, young man. Are you ready to ride the wacky waterfall?
That's just the bathtub with the shower head running.
Nope, it's the wacky waterfall.
It's the shower, Dad.
Waterfall.
Wacky.
There's an easier way to save. To get a free rate quote, go to geico.com. Then buy online, over the phone, or at your local Geico office.
Green light. Hey girl, school zone. I'm getting hungry. Car changing lanes. You want to meet me for pizza? Stop sign. Intersection clear. Yeah, street. Pizza sounds good. Ballin Street? Girlin Street!
It's hard to concentrate on two things at once, like texting and driving. Stop the text, stop the wrecks. How will you stop texting and driving? Tell us at stoptextstoprex.org. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
This is Elizabeth Saint. You know, in my journeys, I've confronted an over 1,000-year-old demon from the depths of Shepherdstown. But then, you know what happened? I came across Mike and Dave. And hot damn, nothing could have prepared me for the Odyssey Files. My second favorite radio show. I love you guys.
And we are back. So you're listening to the Odyssey Files here.
That's a great segue.
Here on the Cosm Network and the Iron Range Radio Network. Yeah. You can't have Elizabeth Saint on the show and not play the Elizabeth Saint.
No, exactly.
And apparently, Elizabeth Saint is not currently on the show.
Well, that's all right. Then we'll talk about her until she gets here.
That's fine.
There she is. There it ended.
Hi.
Too early. Didn't even get to talk about you.
I didn't know. I didn't know if, I was supposed to stay in the back or...
No.
How are you going to be our guest if you're going to be in the back?
I don't know.
I think Elizabeth would say this. What do you think, Mike? That would be a good interview. Yeah.
We've done a show like that.
It did go very well. Yeah.
It would be filled with our praise. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
if we had. So I don't know if anybody has listened to the show this long, but a lot of people do not know the simple fact is you, Miss Saint, were our very first guest ever.
I know. It's so wild. And oh no, I was going to say, I thought the second time was in a second cemetery, right? The first time, I don't remember where I was.
I think the first time you were in the cemetery.
Yeah, first time you were in the cemetery because we're like, where are you? And you're like, oh, I'm just walking through a cemetery. And we're like,
okay.
Yeah, right.
I was on a cemetery.
Yeah, you were walking through a cemetery. Yep.
I was also I wasn't only just walking through a cemetery. I was also sipping bourbon.
Well, there you go.
You did not share that with us until right now.
No, I was.
That's okay. That's all right.
I was. If you ever saw like the camera tilt away, it was probably because I was taking a little sip. It was like a production get together, so they were like grilling and
Gotcha.
And I just, ironically, right across the street from where they were doing this was a cemetery. And I was like, guys, I gotta go do this thing. And just decided I would walk around there. It was a perfect setting. I sat next to a couple people there. I don't remember their names, but hopefully they didn't mind.
As long as you shared the bourbon, I think you're safe.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I poured one out for them.
Yep. Always got to pour a shot for the dead.
Poured one out for my homies.
Yep.
I think it's pretty safe to say, though, that both of us, I should say all three of us, but you and the Odyssey Files, Dave and I, have come a long way since then. So I mean,
oh yeah.
How would you classify the last 4 years?
One hell of a journey. Yeah, it really has been. It's I think because I never really imagined I'd be doing all the different things that I ended up doing. I'm an adventurous person naturally, but I just didn't really see it ever going this way. I guess, when I first moved down to the DC area, it was because, I'm an engineer and that's my background, and I was working for the government as an electrical engineer. And I think I just didn't expect it to go down this path, I guess. I obviously have always been obsessed with the paranormal. It's always been a part of my life, but it wasn't something that I vocalized or had other friends I would talk about it with. And then when I moved down here to DC, I ended up finding a local team on the down low, because nobody in my family or no other friends knew that I was doing it. But on the weekends, we'd go and investigate. And I felt like we were kind of like this group of misfits in a way, because when you're in the DC area, it's like, it's very common to either work for the government, be a contractor for the government, or obviously you have some connection in some way, shape, or form. So that's kind of what my team was. Everyone was either prior military or worked for the government in some way, and it was an interesting group of people. But that was kind of the start of really getting more into the field. But I never imagined that it would go the way it did. It wasn't an intention.
So I probably know that you couldn't tell us this because you're sworn to secrecy. Otherwise, you're going to get abducted by the guys in the black van.
I am the guys in the black van.
No, you're not. But did you ever get an opportunity to go investigate anything let's not say the White House, but any type of major kind of government type of thing where they were like, well, yeah, I'm ex-military. I know so-and-so over here. We could probably get into this lab. We could probably get into this over here. I mean, did you guys ever get an opportunity to do anything where you were like, holy shit, this is amazing?
No, unfortunately, no. I mean, there's a ton of history here, and you can investigate anything and get anything. But actually the place I used to work, I did one night, everyone had left the lab, and the lab was interesting. It was deep in the woods. You'd go back, you'd go into the complex, but then to get to my building, you'd go through the woods, down some ways, and it was kind of its own little entity. There weren't any windows.
Were you in Nevada here, or are you in DC? Because it sounds a lot like an Area 57 type of setup.
Yeah, well, there's some interesting places out there in the world. But no, it was. But I did one time. So obviously, we had FLIRs to check our electronics and stuff. And I did one night when I was by myself go around with a FLIR because I was curious, because it was a really old building. And I was like, yeah, I know that there's some probably old school engineer haunting these halls here, and I'm gonna say hello. But what was also really awesome was a lot of the guys that I worked with had been engineers for years and years and years. They're the original engineers. And sometimes they knew that I was into this stuff, and sometimes they'd come talk to me after hours and be like, have you ever thought of this? Have you ever tried this? Because they knew that I was getting into like making gear and stuff. So it was always cool. Yeah.
So you were making paranormal equipment even before like Ghost of Shepherdstown even happened.
I started making it. Well, there's like a crossover. So the first person. So after filming season 1, Nick had said to me, you know, he was shooting Paranormal Lockdown in the fall and asked if I would make any equipment for the show. He was like, you know, you're an engineer. Why don't you make something for it? And I said, oh, hell yeah, absolutely. That would be awesome. So I ended up making a few pieces, and that was kind of like the official start of it. Yeah.
Are you still making equipment?
Not as much, but I am going to be making something here shortly for Steve Shippey, because we're going to be doing something together here soon. And I told him, all right, for this one coming up, I'm going to make some gear for this one, because I like it to be custom to the environment or what we plan on picking up on. Or, you know, when I worked on Paranormal Lockdown, like season 3 and 4, most of the stuff that I would build would be on the fly. Like something would happen to Nick and Katrina, and I'd say like, all right, just give me 1 hour. I'd go to the RV and I'd be soldering and like doing creating the circuit, and like, but it would be so awesome because it was like it made sense, you know? Because how many times can like, usually you'll have like a set group of equipment. It's like, this is what we got, this is what we're going to experiment with, and that's great and that's fine. Well, it's not really great, but that's separate issues I have. But like in a situation like that, I love to be able to put something together that makes sense for what we're trying to pick up on, that makes sense to validate their experience, you know?
So here's a question for you. So I love the concept of making something on a fly, because to me, my brain takes that as going into an investigation and any investigation and being repetitive in what you do versus going into an investigation, kind of reading and feeling the environment and then structuring like how you want to go about it, and, you know, and going whatever direction you feel is there or what you need to go type of thing.
Yeah.
So that said, if you're trying to make a piece of equipment, is the energy that you're trying to catch, is it around that long? Like, cause is it like the whole, I don't know. So you know, right when you said that, my brain's like spinning and I'm going, well, a lot of times things pop in and pop out and pop in and pop out. So if you're going to go and build something, is that the things that you're trying to capture, is it going to be for something that you know is still going to be there? Or is it just one of those kind of like, I hope it's still here when I'm done in 45 minutes or 20 minutes or however long it takes you to get done with a piece?
I think every location is obviously very different. You know, it really depends. I find when we were doing the season in the UK, for instance, it's more than likely that as some of those energies there were just there for a long time and that they just lingered. It was a different feeling than any place I've been to here in the States. And I mean, it's a good point. It's a good question. I think that like the location, it just depends. In my case, for equipment that I was building, I mean, it's always going to be a hit and miss. But there were a few occasions where I did make something because something had just happened to them, and then they did get something later during the night investigation, and I thought that was so cool. Like, I mean,
can you specifically say what like you made, or are these like proprietary secrets?
No. So I'll give you a good example. So they were interviewing a lady at a location, and they were right outside the front door, and all of a sudden there was a crash that was heard in the front room. Like there's 2 windows there that you could see into, and there was a crash right in that room. If you were staring at the front of the place. So they went inside, and a mirror that had been hanging on a hook on the wall fell down. And of course, your first instinct is like, oh, the nail was just too weak and it just fell down by itself. But no, actually, the nail was still in the wall and it was still angled up. And this is a wire hang with a mirror. So it had to go up over that in order to fall. So mirror was broken, obviously, but we were still able to hang like a portion of it on the wall. And what I did was I went to the RV and I started putting a circuit together that essentially had an accelerometer in it, which essentially detects any kind of motion in the X, Y, Z direction. Also, this particular chip that I was using, if anything were to tap the mirror, or if anything were to, if the mirror were to experience free fall again, that this device would alarm. So in the middle of the night when they were investigating, it ended up actually going off. And the only way that could have happened was if the mirror was moved a certain amount, or if it was tapped at any point. And I created, and what's also nice is like creating the threshold for that. I'm not going to create a threshold that's too low. That's like, if the wind blows, like it's going to detect that. Like I wanted to make it just substantial enough to that if that thing were to ever go off that night, that you would absolutely know that there was something to it.
Right.
And that was pretty cool.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
So I'm actually going to steal a question that Dave likes to ask. So this is all Dave's idea. I'm just going to take it for tonight because it's my turn to ask a question. So if you could let's just say money and equipment and everything else meant nothing, like it was irrelevant, you could get whatever you wanted, what piece of equipment would you build and what would it do?
Well, it's actually, a lot of people ask if I sell the things that I've built, and I tell them no, but I do follow it up with, but I do plan on making something available in the future. It's something I've always promised that I'll do and that I want to do. The thing is like cost is a huge deal to me, because I feel like too many people in the industry are spending thousands of dollars on tools that are not, they're designed to, in a lot of cases, give you what you want.
I feel like that's a personal attack, Elizabeth.
Sure. People can take it however they want, but not only that, like if you're creating a product to sell to somebody, you're not going to be using the best parts. Ultimately, you're going to be using parts that are, affordable. They're probably not going to be as sensitive as they could be, because when you're using really expensive parts, the cost is going to go really high up. I think that a lot of times another issue is people don't understand the equipment that they're using. And you can open up some of these devices and I can tell you, oh, well, that's $20 worth of parts. And you just paid what, $300 for it? And that's a major issue that I have when it comes to like all of this, to be honest. And yes, I understand that there's production costs and manufacturing costs and all of that stuff, but there's no one in the industry that's showing people how they can take a group of components and put it together and have something for $20-$30. It's doing the same thing as your $300 piece of equipment. And
it's because you ruined their livelihood. That's why.
Yeah. But,
right. That's the bottom line is money. So income.
Yeah. So I think like I want to put something out that is more of an all-in-one device, but I also want it to be very transparent. I want people to, hey, if you're like a DIY type of person, if you're somebody that wants to learn more electronics, that you would be able to code and program certain aspects of it the way that you want for certain settings of your environment. So you could change the threshold, so you could do different things, so you could understand the technology that you're actually using and what it's actually measuring. And I think the transparency part of it is such a big deal to me, Like it's very rare that you'll find any kind of specs on what is actually being detected. You buy a REM pod Do you have any idea like what's doing what components are being used? What's the sensitivity of the detector inside of it? No, like you just don't know the sensor data. I wish people would supply that. And when I put something out, I want people to know, like, okay, this is this sensor. This is the thresholds of what it has. This is what could interfere with it. This was what could give you a false alarm. And it's not to say that every false alarm is not to be like recognized, because I think that there's an aspect of the paranormal where, you know, it doesn't matter how much data you have. It doesn't matter if it shouldn't be possible, it's still happening.
Right.
And a lot of times, like when you're using multiple devices, it's validating that experience in front of you. And then you can't say that like, oh, that's just like a technological error. That's just an error in the sensor. Like, you know, like there's too many variables in this field to say that like that it can't be something. Like even when you can rule it out, even when you can debunk things sometimes, I think that you still have to keep a door open for the fact that impossible things are able to happen, you know?
So I'm going to follow up with something you said, and I don't care what piece of equipment it is. You can pick one, I'll pick one, whatever, but let's just say REM pod, all right, just for an example. So if you took a REM pod and you broke it down, and obviously being an electrical engineer, you take a look at it and you're like, yep, this is how this works. This is what this is the circuitry, this is whatever, okay? If you were going to recreate that, if you were going to create the Elizabeth St. REM pod, what would be different in it? I mean, would using better quality parts make it better? Or would you design something like that, and just sticking with this one device now, not blanketing the whole industry, but like, so just using this as an example, if you were to build a REM pod, would it have 10 times the range, 20 times the range? Could you set it in the middle of a room and have it pick up somebody walking through a doorway 8 feet away versus having to walk right up to the antenna and touch it, which is currently how it operates?
I think you could go up to 30 if you wanted to. With certain sensors, but I think like most of the designs that I create are based off of, a lot of times I like to make them as intelligent as possible. I do a lot of programming in them, so they're really taking in the environment and really monitoring itself based on the environment and consistently baselining, because a lot of like my background specifically is in control systems. So when I program something, I'm programming it to think of every possible thing that could potentially happen to it and being able to adjust itself accordingly.
Well, that would be a huge difference. So if you had a REM pod that was constantly reading the environment and baselining itself,
instead of just when you held the antenna, or
correct. Then now you're getting rid of almost all of your possibilities of false positives. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, isn't that in that sense?
Yeah, you can have the REM pod and it can be, just constantly monitoring the environment, the way it's around. Like you can have like a baseline button, for instance, that would make it super easy, so you don't have to wait. I know, some of the devices you have to wait like 10 seconds for it to be in your hand, and then it'll baseline itself, which is fine. It's smart. But I also know the people that are doing that are also engineers themselves, so I think that they think about it a little differently. But yeah, I think that like for the devices I make, I like to make them as intelligent as possible, but it's just because that's like always been my background. And then at the same time, I like it to mimic my experience as much as possible too, to the extent that you can with the sensors that are available on the market.
So one of the things that I always hear, especially from scientists who don't want to include the paranormal, as an actual scientific field, one of their big things that they always complain about is our equipment. And, what does it really read? I've been asked multiple times, and I don't have an answer to it. Do you calibrate your equipment? after every investigation, or do you just turn on the MEL? Do you just turn on the K2 and off you go? How accurate is it? And I know fully well that probably half of my equipment that I've bought probably needs to be calibrated. So as somebody who is an engineer.
Yeah, even if it has that feature.
As I say, do they even have the feature to do it though?
You're not going to get that off the K2. It's a very simple circuit.
Well, exactly. So, I mean, because that was my thing, is like, I don't know, you click a button on the top and it turns on. Like there's there's no hit this button and it recalibrates itself. Like there's not that option on it. So, I mean, but as somebody who is an engineer and a part of the paranormal, what is it like for you to walk like both those paths and to try to bring like the scientific field into what you make?
So there was a period of time where I worked for a company where I would do these like Engineering Thursday blog posts. So it was Engineers Day. And, the engineering community hates the paranormal. And I would put out these posts, a lot of times on the gear that I had made, and like I would get really ridiculed for it. And it'd be quite difficult because, I get it, very logic driven, detail oriented. But, I think the stupidest thing is to think and believe that there are not invisible forces around us that aren't affecting us every single day. I mean, how could you even be an electrical engineer without believing in the fact that, like, I cannot see electricity, but I see how it affects me every single day in my environment? Does electricity not exist? Like, I think that, no great scientist or anyone that's been notable, was ever thinking inside the box, thinking like, oh, this can't happen, this doesn't exist. I mean, and it extends beyond that field too, like if everyone, just believed what they wanted to believe or said like, oh, show me proof, show me data, show me science, like that's absolutely ridiculous, because at the end of the day, we're all in the same place. We're all like experiencing this place that I think we're never going to really understand or get a grasp of. And then you can always, at the end of the day, after everything else is said and done, you can still say, are we even here? Or are we just a simulation in itself? Because as technology, goes on, the likelihood of that being a reality is very possible. So I think like it's ridiculous when dealing with the science community, engineering community sometimes, because they're not willing to step outside the box. And it's such a shame, because it would be such an asset to the paranormal field, in my opinion. There's so much that could be done if there were more actually getting into the field and exploring the possibilities there, because there's something there,
I do know. There is something there. I don't know what it is yet. Probably not going to find out until after I cross over, and then who knows, maybe I won't even find out then.
Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe it'll just be the next step, and it's going to be another 1,000 steps past that before we get a glimpse behind the curtain. Who knows?
Right. Or what I heard the other day, bright light. Oh, maybe it was you guys who were talking about it. Someone else had mentioned it, and I thought to myself, like, oh, that's really funny. But maybe the bright light that you see at the end is really just you waking up on some table, or you being born, I think is what you guys said. Yeah.
Right.
I always I used to say like, oh, it could very well be, you're just like, you're waking up and you're like coming out of the simulation, and they're like, so great job, on that life, and you're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
What do you mean great job? Your next mission will be, and it's
yeah.
who knows?
Yeah. It's the whole Matrix concept.
Yeah. I honestly would have to say that if that is the reality, I'd be very disappointed if they would just be like, oh, all right, well, you screwed that up. Let's start another one. And this is just all some big.
I'm so ready. I'm so ready to become a cyborg. You have no idea. I'm ready for that. Integrate me into technology. I'm ready to be a halfsy. You know, half robot, half human. I always said towards the end of my life, when the technology exists, I have no problem transferring my consciousness, you know, into some machine. That would be great.
That'd be cool. That would be cool.
I mean, just think of the dance moves, you know.
I know. Yeah.
No.
My mind didn't.
Oh,
go
come
there.
on.
Sorry.
We're getting,
come on.
you know, implants and stuff like that. We're getting close.
God,
then you can hack people's brains. I can't wait for that one.
I would tell you, like we learned on a show a while back, and and this was brought up in a topic, and it stuck with me, and now it's kind of like my manifesto. If we're talking about the possibility of something existing, you know, it's already been done. It's already there, and it has been for about 20, 30 years. And now, and the whole realization of like, well, it finally trickles down to us, and we go, wow, that would be cool if, and that shit's already, that is like old in the archives. Like I think of like Raiders of the Lost Ark, where like they show up at we got to put this in, you know, in the archives, and they show up and turn a light on, and it's just this gigantic mouth, you know, this humongous building, and all these boxes of stuff that is just like so important. But it's like, whatever, that was yesterday's news, man. Tomorrow we're moving on, we're moving forward. So I think that they can probably take a human consciousness now, like a human brain concept, and your memories and stuff like that, and probably download them. I think that already exists. Now, whether they can stick that into a robot, I don't know. But it'd be interesting if they did, right?
Yes.
Elizabeth, your smile, your smirk is one of those, like, I am privy to information that I cannot tell you.
I know, I saw that too. I know. She's totally staying away from my whole concept and question everything. All she did was smile and didn't say a damn thing. So I'm just going to leave that alone. So it just reaffirms that I'm on the right page.
Yeah, play with your hair if we're on the right track.
Yeah, you can't say that live on the air though. So
you know, years ago, when I was like a teenager, I remember watching this video of this guy giving a talk that worked in the government, and he made this comment, you know, any technology that you think we have, it's actually like 50 years in the future from now. And I always think back to that comment.
Yeah.
And I mean, even if you look into the technology that existed in World War II, like sometimes it like kind of blows my mind a bit. Like there's just a lot that I think that, you know, like there's so much being done. I mean, now the private tech groups or the underground groups are like, you know, there's definitely stuff out there for sure. You know, and you know, I remember one time when I was going through good friend Johnny, a good friend of mine, Johnny, who's an engineer that I used to work with. We were going through the process of we had a pending patent. We were going through the patent process for something that we had created, and what we found was the limitations a lot of times to creating things like really came down to like if it had not been created yet and it didn't exist, finding a manufacturer that would create it for you, even if you had the money to do it. And like that was like a roadblock. And I think I take that situation, I think to myself, like, okay, how many of those roadblocks exist for other things? And, you know, I think there's plenty of things that just have probably secretively, obviously been developed, but then there's a bunch of things that we have the potential to do that just the resources or the way in which to make it happen doesn't exist yet, but it's just on the cusp of happening. So, yeah.
What's your take on reverse engineering? You think that propelled us forward, like a lot of kind of theorists say that, you know, with the whole Roswell thing, and that if you take a look at the advancement, like how rapidly that decade and that decade, really, let's just say that decade afterwards, like all of these things were just like spiraling forward so quickly.
I just think that there's aliens amongst us.
Well, right. I agree with you. But do you think that was man? Do you think mankind was just having this epiphany of intelligence, or do you think that something was gifted to us and that we ran forward with it?
Like I said, I think there's aliens amongst us. I think that there's.
That's a very blasé answer.
No, I think that, you know, like I think that you could.
I agree with you. There are aliens.
Well, I think that it doesn't have to necessarily, like, you know, look like a gray or something like that. Like, yeah, I think that, you know, I think that there's a lot of people in different positions that aren't from here, for sure, 100%. And I think that, you know, that could be a part of it. During that time, that could be a part of it. I think reverse engineering absolutely is a thing. It does help. I mean, obviously, if you have your hands on some technology that hasn't been created here yet, I think it just depends on whether or not it has similar resources, you know?
So, like, whether you could replicate it or not. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And also depending on the environment, obviously, our gravity is going to be very different than wherever something else could have come from.
Right.
Or just elements in general, I think, that haven't been discovered yet or don't exist here on Earth. Yeah, I think plays a part in it. But yeah, I think that it's possible. I'm not going to say that it's not. I also think that there wasn't any distinct point where, you know, things just randomly came down. I think that something else has always been here.
So this question came up while we were talking about, or in my head anyway, while we were talking about like downloading person's consciousness or whatever into a computer. And I know that concept makes you exceptionally happy.
I know.
But here's my question. Yeah, you can download the memories, you know, you can download maybe mentalities or you know, whatever that are in the brain. But if you do that, do you lose what actually makes you human? Like, how do you download feelings? How do you download your soul?
Yeah, I think then we're talking about, you know, I've had this conversation with people before, and it's like, you know, when you get into the concept of cloning, or like when we start creating AI at a higher degree than we do now. But I see that you can get some little guys now that like will like put your dishes away and stuff. You see that? The robots that you can get.
Watch the Olympics.
I can't wait.
They just had a robot shooting half court shots and making them at the Olympic Games.
Was it from like the Boston Dynamics company or different?
No, I don't know. It just showed it as like
robot's doing like flips. It's like,
yeah. I mean, they brought this dude out and he picked up the basketball himself off the rack, put it in his hand, and flipped it, and just one hand flipped and was making half quarters.
I gotta see that. I gotta see that. I believe it though. Yeah, it's great. I think that it's possible for a clone or for a robot to. Some people might think that I'm a little crazy, but I'll explain my reasoning why. I think it's possible for it to get a soul, so to speak. And the reason why I think that is because all that we are is just like a biological vessel. Our body, I mean, essentially is harvesting our soul. So why can't that happen in any other way? We're just this material, this matter. We have electrical systems. And if there's a way into which you can kind of create a similar environment to where it can, you know, do something like that, I think it's very possible. I you know, like when you think about, I know that there's a lot of women that, you know, they have this experience when they're pregnant where they can feel the moment in which when the soul enters the womb. Mm-hmm. I had that experience, mm-hmm. And I think that let's forget religious perspectives for a moment. And I think that somewhere in there, it would be potentially possible. Then you're going to think this is funny, but anytime I see someone get mad at their computer, I say, they will remember this moment. They will remember. And I joke about it, but I think that it's, you know, when you think about a rock, for instance, a crystal or something, if you take that crystal and every single day you're putting in like some negative energy into it, like eventually over time, like it's probably going to start forming into something that other people will be like, oh, I don't know about that rock, or they'll be like, I get weird feelings with that thing. I think it's the same thing, or like tulpas that people create and generate. It's like, you're just manifesting something in a space and environment that's a concentration of energy. And obviously we're a more complex, I guess, to an extent, intelligent form of that. So I think that it's possible, I don't want to rule it out, because I do think it's possible. And maybe that's like, the part of me that just loves science fiction. And I like to believe that, a good robot will one day get a soul. I don't know.
God, why did Wall-E just pop into my head, right?
Oh,
Wall-E. Why did that just pop into my head?
I went full on Data from Star Trek Next Generation on that one.
Yeah, no, I went Wall-E. Sorry. All right. Well, I got a segue here. So we're talking about sending consciousness. We're talking about sending consciousness into something. So I want to ask your opinion on one of the questions that we read earlier tonight. I don't know. Were you listening to the questions, or were you busy doing stuff? Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I think so.
So the question of the girls that were like playing games to creep themselves out, and then they decided to make a homemade Ouija board.
Yeah.
And because the reason that like I said, to reiterate in case somebody wasn't listening, was the whole thing. The reason that grabbed me with that was the fact that they hadn't actually started playing it yet, had started experiencing some type of entity or presence showing up. So, and Mike brought up a great point. Is that with the Ouija board, you take it out of the box, you set it down on the table. If you're not touching it, you're not putting any energy into it. There's no intent happening. Nothing's going to happen, right? Why would anything show up? Because it's just, you might as well put the game of life out there, or Monopoly or whatever. It doesn't make any damn difference what it is. It's just a piece of something. But if you are making your own Ouija board, right? Because you don't have one. So you're making your own Ouija board, and while you're making it, you're thinking about questions that you want to ask it when your task is complete. Do you think that is enough intent to actually cause the beginning of a manifestation of something to be interested and come and see what you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because it's just the intent. Yeah, for sure. And I think that, I know like Robert Murch talks a lot about, he is the guy to go for Ouija. I think that, whenever I've heard him give lectures and stuff, it's always an interesting perspective, because like to an extent, what has made the board so much worse for people is absolutely like, Hollywood, because there's all these rules that are associated with it that people now full-heartedly believe. And I think that a lot of people sometimes underestimate their intent. They underestimate how they can scare themselves. They underestimate their own energy, what it can give off, what it can communicate with, what it can do. I think that all of that ends up being this huge concoction of like a bad experience for most people. Because if you are going into something believing like you're going to communicate with something scary or demonic or whatever, even if it wasn't, it doesn't matter, because you've already convinced yourself that's what you're doing. So you could subconsciously or consciously be opening up a door to not only your worst fears becoming a reality, but potentially things that you and I don't believe anybody quite understands. Yeah, so I think intent is huge.
I'm going to look him up, this Robert Murch. I just typed it in as you were saying it, because I had never heard of him before.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to do some digging around with him.
Talking Board Historical Society is a fantastic organization, and
it's been around a long time. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, it's really. But
Ouija boards have been around a long time. Is what I meant. Not necessarily this society, but
this is but they all are. they are collectors, but they're also like a really great wealth of knowledge because like the origin of some of these concepts, you know, like some of them, like, you know, the rules you have to do when you're doing the board, like it's Hollywood script, you know, but people believe that like I have to practice and I have to obey these certain things. I have to say goodbye. Otherwise, you know, like there's all of these things that exist now that weren't actually the case originally. And I think over time, people have just made it worse for themselves when dealing with it.
I will say this, you know, I'm 55 and my grandmother had a Ouija board and her grandmother had it before her. And there was a set. Now, this is going back long before, you know, we're talking about console TVs and black and white TV. There's no cell phones and internet and no, you know, mass disinformation of anything to the public. But my grandmother had a set practice routine when we used the board that she would do. So, you know, she always made a point to say goodbye. So I'm going to I don't know that that's necessarily like something that's happened in the recent where like society has said, you got to do this. You know, she was taught by her grandmother. So you're going back to early 1900s and they were using those practices then. Yeah. So I think there's more truth to some of that stuff. Yeah.
Sure. But it's just what people.
I would agree with you though. Yeah, I would agree that you're going into it, you know, and that a lot of times you're throwing your fears in there. And I've said this 100 times or probably 100,000 times that if you're going in to do something and you're afraid of doing it, then get the hell out of there and don't do it because nothing good's going to come out of it. You're not going to conquer your fears by conjuring a demon or by conjuring your subconscious demon or whatever. Because whether it's a legitimate demon that shows up on the planet Earth and starts terrorizing your life, or whether it's a demon in your own mind that you created based on something you did that scared the hell out of you, it's really irrelevant because it's going to do the same amount of damage to you. Right. Yeah. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. There's it's funny because when I would go with my team and when we would go investigate houses, some people would get themselves so worked up. Yeah. And I would always come from the perspective of, you know, like if there wasn't something, they'd be like, oh, we've been told by other teams that there's a demon in the basement. We may potentially have 3 demons. And you're like thinking to yourself, like, who are these teams, first of all, that are telling you this because they're telling you this and then they're leaving and they're expecting you to sleep here at night. And you could have just been having like a few creaks or something like that. Suddenly you got a demon. And by the time you're seeing them, they really believe it. But now they're getting all this activity. And you say to yourself, okay, well, either, you know, you really have something serious or it doesn't matter because by this point, you believe it so much that you've created this environment of insanity, you know?
Right.
And that goes back to like, I just don't think that sometimes people understand like how powerful their minds could potentially be, especially on their space. You know, you're putting your energy out into the space you live in every single day. It's going to affect it. You can feel when someone has a bad day that walks in the door. What you think that, you know, if you're not having anxiety every single day in the space, like, oh, what's that? Oh, what's that? Well, what's that? Over time, like, I think I try to tell people all the time, like when you think about, like, let's just take electrical component, for instance, like just a capacitor, you know, it's just a bunch of materials constructed in a certain way that can store energy. And if you're building up the capacitor, charging that capacitor, like, you know, you're housing that energy in that space. And I feel like your environment can do the same exact thing. You know, you can build it up to a place where like all of a sudden it can just like that be triggered, discharge, and oh, there's an event that happens because you're pumping out crazy energy into the space. And it's like, what do you expect?
I think they don't know what to expect until it happens.
Right.
We know what to expect because we deal with it. But I think our clients don't know what to expect because they're unaware that they're doing that. They think that they think it's an outside influence that's making their space or life negative when there's a very real world possibility that it's an inward influence, that it's themselves that are making their lives negative and scary and uncomfortable. Yeah. That's difficult from our perspective though. And I'm just going to go on record. I'll go on record saying that It's very difficult to be an investigator and show up in somebody's house who's been told by
Yes.
3 other teams that you got
Right.
all kinds of negativity going on here, and then you show up with a really rational explanation that's intelligent,
Well,
and they look at you like, man, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. 'Cause those
exactly.
other
And
guys
they
said
don't want to. They don't want to hear it.
right? They don't want to hear it. They just want to continue on that path of misery. Yeah.
There's also people that just, and I don't know what it is, but they feed off the idea that they are super haunted, that they have all of these problems, that they have this massive attachment. I don't know why anyone would wish these things upon themselves, but it's just not healthy, and it's hard because they already have it made up in their mind that this is happening to them. And I wonder to myself sometimes, like, what is it going to take for that person to not desire to have some sort of like negative attachment? I don't know. Like, it makes no sense to me. Maybe it's just an odd attention thing. I don't know. But
yeah.
I think like the sad part is how much of that they'll just contribute to it, and it'll just get worse, you know?
Exactly. So we only have like 5 minutes left. So if this goes over, I'm fine with that. as long as the boss lady will let us do it. But there's a topic that I wanted to bring up, and we just haven't yet because obviously we've been rolling along. So, and I've been wanting to ask you this for actually a really, really long time. So one of the things that you guys got to do in Ghost of Shepherdstown was you were pretty much like the team. Like everything that was called in went to you. And by doing that, you were able to see the patterns, you know, the how everything connected together. So, I mean, Dave knows as well as I do, especially around here in the Twin Cities, there's probably at least a dozen teams, paranormal teams, that I can just list off the top of my head. And clients are going to all of them, you know, to whoever they can find to help them. And I'm assuming that happens in towns all across the world, probably. So my question to you is, how much do you think paranormal activity is connected to each other and we don't see it because all different teams are going everywhere else instead of one team going to everywhere?
Yeah, I after doing Ghost of Shepherdstown, I really wondered the same thing. I mean, it was the first time that I was able to stay in one place for an extended period of time and see how it changed over months, see how like all these different places were connected. And that was such a cool experience, but it really makes you think, like, I don't know if it's beneficial for us to just do a one-stop shop sometimes, you know, or to just be in a place for one night, like, because all of us know that, like you were saying earlier, it's like that it changes over time so much. And how can you learn the pattern of anything if you're not going to be there long enough to experience it? And then it gets really difficult, because then if you have lots of different teams investigating like just one place, it's always going to be changing depending on who you have in that space, you know? Like that doesn't help. Then you're changing it, you're affecting it, because they're bringing their shit from home. Then you're coming into the space, and then by then it's like, okay, well, what is the original energy at this point? We don't really know.
Yeah, it's gone.
I mean, there's some places that are really haunted, you know, and have like terrible history, and people go there and it's like, oh, it's so crazy, right? But how much of that is us just contributing to it? And I think that it would be super beneficial to be able to investigate more, like I had the opportunity to do on Shepherdstown, or like really dissect the town, really dissect the history, like get into the locations and see the connections and see what like the source of everything was. And something that was so cool about Shepherdstown, especially in season 2, was like, you really see that things are interconnected. You know, they have like the whole cave system out there that I wasn't even aware of. like just the way, you know, the elements are, the water runs, the fact that you can find large blocks of limestone in people's basements. Like, it's just like, what is happening? But it all makes sense. And then the railroad was right there. You got water, you got the railroad, you got the limestone in the basement. You have like this history, you have the war, you have the battlefields right across the water that were coming into the town. It's like, it's just a lot. And you think to yourself, like, this is, if I were just look at it from an element perspective, it's the perfect place, you know? But how many of those places exist, and how cool would it be to unravel like a deeper meaning and understanding of the spiritual forces that flow in these areas, you know? Yeah,
you know, it's funny. It's funny that you bring that up, because it makes me think that there is a house. I'm not going to name names, but there's a house that really didn't have any activity whatsoever. And there was a story put out about, like, the first groups of people that went there are like, yeah, there's nothing happening here, you know. And then there was a story that was generated. And then teams with less experience went out and went to this location and started investigating it and started claiming that they were having experiences that went hand in hand with the story. And time has elapsed, and now this house is haunted. But I don't think it was haunted to begin with. So in that capacity, that's extremely interesting that it goes hand in hand with kind of what you're talking about, is that we have taken this location, which I don't think was active, and because of all of the energies that have been brought in there from human beings, has created this manifestation of energy there.
Yeah.
That is a haunting, is a classic haunting, even though I don't think anything that was there was like that. And that's one thing I hate about going to public locations. Yeah. I absolutely hate going to public. I look forward to going to some. Like we went to Moundsville. I would not. That was on my bucket list. I wanted to go there. I knew the history of it. Or at least I thought I did. I really love the concept of the old Indian burial ground right in front of the prison. I like the fact that it was like one of the top 5 bloodiest, most violent prisons of all time. You just know energy is going to be there. You just know it's going to be. It just makes sense that it's going to stay contained. Some of those guys are going to be contained there. And it didn't disappoint. The place was haunted as hell. We had amazing experiences. Absolutely amazing. Caught tons of great evidence, had great personal experiences. But I wonder at some other locations you go to, how much of that stuff is created by mankind. And if you go to a place that's like the hot spot for people to go, right? And they've been going there for 30 years, 20 years, and it's a new team every night. So let's just say they're not there every night, but let's say out of a year, you got 250 nights that people are there.
Yeah.
Times 30 years. Well, what kind of shitstorm did you just bring in?
Yeah.
Right? Who knows what's there now?
Yeah.
And I don't think that, and people go there and they're like, oh, yeah, I expect like that story of Jenny. Oh, we got great evidence about that little girl that drowned, and that's what started the whole thing. And so, did you really get started? Did you really get some evidence about Jenny? You know,
or how many people were echoing it for years and years and years. And
right. How many people were telling the story of Jenny, you know, over and over and over again.
Yeah, exactly.
And now you got this little Jenny running around in there who never existed and still doesn't even exist, but somehow she's there. You know, it's weird.
Well, also think about like movie sets when they're filming horror movies sometimes, and how they like suddenly start having activity.
I would love to be able to investigate some of the old horror sets, like just old movie sets like that, and see. Yeah, because I've heard like old theaters are great.
The stairs right here in DC, you know.
You do. Have you ever gone there?
I actually no, I haven't. I should though.
You should. Now that you mentioned it, you should get the live feed camera and go out there and
do a little. Hey, I got here we go. Yep. I'll just take this with me and we'll go.
Do a little build a little some kind of device specifically for that staircase, and go out there and do a little.
Probably play recordings from the movie.
There you go.
Dive deep there.
And agonize them.
Well, unfortunately, we are out of time. So went by way too fast. And Elizabeth, thank you for coming on. You're supposed to be our first Cosm guest, but obviously that kind of got ruined. That kind of got ruined for us. But we're glad that you're here, and that you will continue to be around, obviously. But for anybody who wants to get like a subscription to Cosm, how can they do that?
Oh, well, you can go to streamcosm.com, or you can go to cosm.com, or you can just Google Cosm, QOSM, and it'll come up.
No, is it Q? It's not QOSM, is it? It's Q0SM.
It is, but yeah, if you go to cosm.com, it is Q0SM, yeah.
Okay, all right.
Told ya.
No,
they didn't believe me.
That's where I sent the mail to, because I'm like, what? Nobody spells it with a 0. I'm like, I looked it up. When I searched,
I spell with a 0.
Well, I'm mistaken. You do spell it with a 0, so I had to bite my tongue on that one.
Yeah. Well, the original logo had, in the O, it had like this bullseye in it. And when the logo was redone, I wanted to kind of pay homage to it. And also, people need to start putting more numbers in their URLs. I mean, why not?
Right.
There you go.
Agreed.
All right. Well, that does it for us. We will be back here next week with Chuck Zukowski. He's going to be coming on and talking about disclosure and everything UFO and cattle mutilation.
Yeah.
And he's going to be here for the full 2 hours. So,
nice.
Which means Dave and I are going to get about 3 questions in.
Yeah, total amongst us, and one of them is going to be like a similar question, and we're just going to look at each other and go, "Yeah, no, that's good. That's close enough to what I was going to ask him."
Nice.
Yeah, we'll get 2 good questions in, and Chuck's going to run for 2 hours. So,
yep, there you go.
That's awesome.
But it will be amazing. So,
yeah,
everybody have a good night. Stay healthy. Stay safe. We want to see you back here next week.
Bye.
Bye, Elizabeth.